The International Aid Transparency Initiative, it was launched in 2008, and the idea was basically to come up with a common standard for reporting aid information from donors. Information was needed to make aid more effective, so we can understand what we're spending and what's being spent and where and to who. We need a common way to compare this information.
People both in the donor country as well as in the recipient country don't know about the projects that are being implemented on their behalf by their governments. And I think there's been a real lack of data and information available about what's going on.
It makes a big difference because in this way also the public and the media can control and monitor if aid is really reaching the poorest and the most vulnerable of the world. It's a huge change in attitudes.
The donors can also be held accountable for in the way and where and how we distribute our finances. So it provides opportunities for the governments in developing countries, and we hope in the longer term also for the citizens of the developing countries to see what kind of financial contributions are coming into their countries. It standardizes and increases transparency of our own system, so we can also inform our own taxpayers and other people in the world that are interested in our activities with more easily accessible information.
It lets you see the links between different players, between companies, between private sector organisations, between governments, and to really find out who gets what amount of money for what projects and how it's then spent.
So this was supposed to create a common time standard to report information in a timely manner, that you get updates at least at every quarter of information that was going from aid flows from this particular donor, where it was going, and comparable categories, and even getting down to geo-specific data so you can look at communities that were supposed to be receiving these funds. And the idea was, if you looked at these different layers of donors, you could see whether you've got 20 donors in one municipality or in one province and none in another, while we know that in this other province there's a lot of problems and maybe there's a lot of need for water programming there, but all the water programming is going in this other province.
At the moment, the data that we provide is from the year before, and with IATI it's going to be possible to report also the future flows and provide more information about current aid.
We would encourage Finnish NGOs to apply the IATI standards, because then we would get more comprehensive information about different kind of activities.
So by getting civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations involved in this process that are receiving aid flows, it helps to better track that money. It helps to better make sure that the transparency cycle is full from one point to the other.
The information shouldn't stop when the donor country releases the money. We should be able to see how NGOs, how international organisations are spending that money, what it's going towards, who is benefiting. Is it all going to contractors or is it going to projects on the ground?
I think for an organization like Plan, the challenge is first being more open ourselves, and I think being part of IATI would be a first good step, because I don't think we can talk about openness or we can talk about government accountability until we're also joining into some of these efforts to be more coordinated, more organized, more open about what's happening with our funding, and then we would have a stronger foothold to support communities, to demand accountability from both community leaders, from district leaders, from central government, and from aid agencies and bilateral institutions.
The value of implementing the International Aid Transparency Initiative for Transparency International, apart from seeing it as an expression of our own principles and beliefs and mandate, is that it also will allow us a better way to see where we're working compared to others. So, for example, now that we can see information about anyone who's reporting to the standard, we should be able to see in governance and anti-corruption activities and specific activities in specific countries, and specifically the local level, what's going on there and whether we need to be there. And what's very interesting about the initiative is it creates a common code. So in theory, you can follow from once it goes out of the government's budget in this country, the donor, till it gets to the project in the other country that's receiving the funding and flows. You should follow that whole trail.
I think the real power lies with the ability to combine it with other data sets. And by putting the information directly in the hands of people who can then use it, I think that's one way that kind of open development and transparency is making a difference on the ground.